This is a suburban home at Killarney Heights in Sydney. The garden reflects the success of its owner, Mr. Alex J. MacArthur. The beautiful setting won a first prize in Sydney's biggest garden competition. It's Mr. MacArthur's haven from the pressure of business problems. But the expanding business leaves him little time to enjoy his hobby. Mr. MacArthur is Managing Director of Thiess Sales Proprietary Limited, Australian distributors of Toyota commercial vehicles.
In Thiess Sales Association with Toyota of Japan, we have had, in the course of the last 10 years, a meteoric rise. The rise has been very successful and has been largely due to the skill and management and also, of course, to the product, which we are very, very proud of. The product came in some 10 years ago with the Toyota Land Cruiser, which has now developed a very, very high reputation in this country. The Toyota Land Cruiser has been sold to a good number of the mining ventures, not to mention some of the pastoral interests and the various other associates that are now spending huge sums of money in Australia. In the course of mining, farming, wool, many of our exports go to Japan. These exports are indeed a real measure of reciprocity, and we at Thiess, in the import of Toyota, are playing our part in this reciprocal trade. In the course of our history and our rise, we have had many, many problems. The problems have been significant when you take into account the vast distances in Australia, the problems we have with dust, snow, general weather conditions. Our costs have been very, very high in this area of selling. To illustrate some of these distances and the problems that we have encountered in Thiess, I take pleasure in presenting to you Toyota in Australia.
Australia is a vast and empty continent. Its entire population is only equal to that of Tokyo, yet it sprawls over an area 16 times the size of Japan. Even the Northern Territory, with the smallest population, is more than 3 times the size of Japan. Australia's enormous distances mean costly problems for the people who sell and service Toyota commercial vehicles. The problems are worst where the vehicles are used under the toughest imaginable conditions. In the scorching heat of Australia's tropical north, the hunters are using Toyotas to catch wild buffalo for the beef trade. The work is hard on men and machinery. The boss, Laurie Howard, and his team of 3 hunters catch as many as 50 buffalo a day. Until recently, the animals were shot for pet food. Now they are captured and tamed with the idea of breeding big commercial herds. The Asian water buffalo was imported by the territory's first settlers less than 150 years ago. When the first settlements were abandoned, the buffalo were turned loose. They bred quickly and now run wild over 100,000 square miles of the territory. Buffalo calves are never separated from their mothers. If the calf escapes, the mother is allowed to go free. With the end of indiscriminate hunting and shooting, more and more tourists have been visiting the territory to see wild animals and birds in their natural surroundings. The sanctuaries are in remote areas, and reliable vehicles are needed to ensure the safety of their passengers. The tourist operator's first Toyota station wagon needed only a new spark plug in 60,000 miles, travel over hot, rough, trackless country. For the first time, tourists may travel in air-conditioned comfort to see some of Australia's unique wildlife. Toyota is making an important contribution to Australia's thriving tourist industry by making it possible to carry passengers into previously inaccessible areas. In stark contrast to the tropical north, Alice Springs, the territory's main tourist centre, is set in arid, semi-desert country. From here, tourist buses travel nearly 300 miles to Ayers Rock. Many tourists come to marvel at the massive rock and its changing colours. The job of distributing Toyota vehicles over this vast, colourful area is handled 1,000 miles north of Alice Springs, in Darwin, capital city of the Northern Territory. The problem of distance facing Thiess sales is illustrated by the fact that it's as far from London to Moscow as it is from Darwin to the island state of Tasmania. Tasmania, Australia's smallest state, should be the simplest to service with Toyota vehicles. But the island is separated from the mainland by 160 miles of ocean. Toyotas must be delivered by shipping lines that are subject to strikes and increasing freight charges. Tasmania has the advantage of cheap hydroelectric power for its expanding industries. Many of its development projects are in mountainous regions, ideal for Toyota four-wheel drive vehicles. By contrast with Tasmania, the biggest state is Western Australia, scene of Australia's dramatic mining boom. Perth is the flourishing capital of the state, which covers nearly 1/3 of Australia's landmass, yet has less than 10% of the nation's population. Prestige Motors handle the distribution of Toyota vehicles throughout the vast area. Among Prestige Motors' customers is McRobertson Miller Airlines, which operates a fleet of Toyota buses in the northern centres like Port Hedland. From here, it's an hour's flight to Mount Newman, one of the world's biggest single deposits of high-grade iron ore. The Mount Newman project is said to contain enough high-grade iron ore to supply the entire world. Reserves of 1,000 million tons have been proved, and the exploratory drilling still has not been completed. Toyotas have worked on the project since its earliest days. Huge quantities of iron ore are already being shipped out to Japanese and Australian mills. Mount Newman holds a contract to supply Japan with 100 million tons over 15 years. To ship the iron ore, a railway line 260 miles long was built to span the wilderness from Mount Newman to Port Hedland. Port Hedland is a hot and lonely part of Australia. It's as far from Tokyo to Manila as it is from Port Hedland to Melbourne, capital city of Victoria, one of Australia's most prosperous states. Melbourne is Australia's second biggest city and the centre of a state that is rich in natural resources. Victoria is expanding at a tremendous rate. Although relatively small in land area, it is responsible for nearly 1/3 the net value of Australia's production. Victoria has the world's biggest deposits of brown coal, providing fuel and power for industry. Coal reserves are estimated at 10,000 million tonnes. In Bass Strait, offshore oil rigs will soon be supplying more than half Australia's oil requirements. During the search for oil, vast reserves of natural gas were also found. By Australian standards, it's only a short step of about 450 miles from Melbourne to South Australia and the capital city, Adelaide. To keep pace with South Australia's rapid development, the Toyota dealer, British Motor Industries, has had to expand its service facilities. The state has doubled its population in the last 20 years and stepped up its industrial output by 1,500%. South Australia is no longer entirely dependent on agriculture, but is still world famous for the fine table wines made in the Barossa Valley. Toyota's involvement in Australia even runs to helping the wine industry. In the Barossa Valley, they say that every year is a vintage year, thanks to the consistently favourable weather conditions. For those who want even more consistent weather, there is always Coober Pedy, 600 miles to the north. Here the rain rarely falls, but the dry earth has given up a fortune in precious opals. The opal fields of South Australia have produced something like $20 million worth of the precious stones. Production has increased in recent years because of mechanization and a growing demand for the beautiful stones. In direct contrast to the dry expanses of South Australia, more than half of Queensland lies within the tropics. The capital city, Brisbane, is the birthplace of the Thiess Group of companies. From Brisbane, the executive staff of Thiess Sales face the problems of distributing Toyota vehicles over Australia's most decentralised state. Brisbane has also one of the most progressive Toyota dealers, Leo Muller Motors. The firm operates a fleet of radio-controlled trucks to provide a fast and efficient spare parts delivery service. In central Queensland, another link of friendship between Australia and Japan is forged during a visit by a Japanese technical mission led by Dr. Sadao Sugimata. The visitors are welcomed by Mr. L.C. Thiess, the founder and chief executive of the Thiess Group. The visitors toured the Maura coal field, which is operated by Thiess, Peabody and Mitsui. The Maura field has one of the world's biggest walking drag lines, used to remove the overburden from the rich coal deposits. The joint Australian, Japanese and American company has spent $30 million on developing the Maura field. The Thiess organisation operates another mine at nearby South Blackwater and has orders to supply coal worth $165 million to Japanese mills. Not far from the coal fields of central Queensland, at Rockhampton, is Australia's first Toyota dealer, Mr. George Jamieson. Nearly 800 miles further north, but still in Queensland, is Lakeland Downs, a massive land development scheme that operates only Toyota commercial vehicles. Lakeland Downs is also particular about its livestock, A sow worth $35,000 is king of the Brahman stud. The organization is concentrating on exports to Asia and has already sent large quantities of grain to Japan. Extending Toyota sales and service through North Queensland has been an expensive business, but the results can be seen in even the most isolated areas. In Cooktown, a local parish priest, Father Jones, uses a Toyota station wagon to take spiritual comfort to remote areas. Father Jones travels an area of 120,000 square miles. Obviously, he needs a reliable vehicle for his task. Sugar is the wealthiest of Queensland's primary industries, with annual exports worth more than $100 million. The cane growing belt extends for more than 1,000 miles along Australia's east coast and is served by a chain of active Toyota dealers. On the waterfront in Townsville, copper from Queensland's mines is loaded for Japan. The state is Australia's top exporter, earning more than $700 million a year. The Port Authority runs Toyota utility trucks supplied by Townsville's progressive dealer. Toyota commercial vehicles must stand up to the toughest conditions in Australia, from Queensland's tropical heat to the cooler climate of New South Wales, even snow in the Southern Highlands. Probably the toughest testing ground for Toyota in Australia has been the massive Talbingo Dam project, a Thiess civil engineering contract worth $43 million. It's the last stage of the vast Snowy River scheme. Rainfall far above average disrupted work on the dam and made conditions difficult. The indestructible Land Cruisers proved just as reliable here as in the tropical north, in the heat and dust of central Australia and in the snows of the southern Alps. Despite the setbacks of weather, Thiess completed the dam wall ahead of schedule. When the Snowy scheme is completed, a network of 16 power stations will generate 3 million kilowatts of electricity. A mountain of rock and clay was shifted to form the wall of the Talbingo Dam. Water diverted from going to the sea and stored in the dams of the Snowy Mountains will help irrigate inland farms. Working conditions are tough in Australia, but sometimes Toyotas take harder punishment on pleasure jaunts. Land Cruiser Club members don't let an obstacle like a flooded river stop them from exploring out-of-the-way places. Many club members are Thiess sales employees who spend all week working with Toyota vehicles and their weekends driving them for pleasure. Australia's biggest city, Sydney. More than 4,000 ships call here every year, many carrying goods to and from Asian countries. Over the past 15 years, Australia's trade with Asia has almost trebled. Toyota forklift trucks are now competing for a bigger share of the market in Australia. Thiess Sales distributes Toyota forklifts through a network of dealers in each state. After organising an Australia-wide distribution system for both forklifts and commercial vehicles, Thiess Sales concentrated on providing modern workshops, servicing equipment and techniques. The nerve centre of the efficient marketing operation is Thiess Sales headquarters in the Sydney industrial suburb of Mascot. Top-level executives confer regularly to deal with problems associated with dealers and distributors throughout Australia. Electronic data processing systems are used to speed up the work of the spare parts department. Under the direction of head office, the system maintains an accurate inventory of spare parts at every location in Australia. In line with its policy of keeping faith with customers, no matter what the problem, Thiess Sales maintains a vast spare parts clearance centre in Sydney. Internal freight emergencies must be solved at all costs. For example, 40 tons of spare parts had to be moved from Townsville to Darwin by road when strikes tied up shipping. Freight charges totaled $6,300. New vehicles are carefully checked before delivery to dealers. Regular training schools are held to ensure that the people responsible for maintaining Toyota vehicles are kept up to date with the latest techniques. Training is a massive problem, complicated by Australia's great distances and wide range of climatic conditions. Training programs must be tailored to cover all imaginable operating conditions. Australia has the lot: heat and dust, ice and snow, huge areas of trackless wilderness, and many thousands of miles of rough roads. Not all dealers can spare time to attend the central school, so a mobile school is sent out to help solve their servicing problems. It's not unusual for the unit to log 10,000 miles on a visit to dealers in remote northern regions. Where major policy decisions are involved, the General Manager of Thiess Sales, Mr. John J. Tiernan, must leave Sydney for remote parts of Australia. Often it means 3 days away from home, airfares totaling $500, and a complete change of climate. Time and distance are the biggest problem to be conquered in Australia. Thiess Sales covers an area far greater than Japan, the home of Toyota. Costs are high for servicing such a sparsely settled continent. But Thiess Sales are confident that Australia's vast potential will ensure even greater expansion in the future.